My first experience with role playing, like I said, was with, I believe it was City of Heroes system back in the late 90s. And I was still in high school in the late 90s. I think some of us were still in middle school or elementary school. Some of us were in the Air Force. Sorry, Force. Um, but I had gone to a local college's game night, and they just had an open game night for their gaming club. And of course, they welcomed me and my buddy in quite happily. And as soon as we started rolling dice, everything we wanted to do, couldn't do it, couldn't make it happen. Nope, you're a failure of a character. And that kind of soured me to RPGs for a little bit. I think it was about 5 years. And that's when I started getting into the tabletop stuff and taking out all my anger on that crowd.
So, like, it sounds like you had a bad experience, obviously. Now,
Oh, yeah.
looking back on it with your knowledge now, do you think that experience could have been made better with a better DM or a better group of players or a better game or a combination of the three?
I think a better DM, hands down, better group of players would have helped the situation. It wasn't really an X card situation. It was more of the DM was just, oh yeah, this kid doesn't know anything. We have an open gaming night because we're obliged to by the college. Let's just get these kids out of here.
It's a shame.
Yeah, quite, because the college has quite a reputable local gaming convention once a year, which sadly got canceled this year due to situations. And I know Tim's daughter, I don't know, is she part of that gaming club now?
Yeah, she is, but not the organization that runs the gaming group, Marmalade Dog.
Yep.
Yeah, she's part of Broncos and Beholders, which is actually the campus game system for Western Michigan University. But the Marmalade Dog is the convention that they hold each year at the campus. I've DM'd there a few different times. Actually, some of our other players have came from there. Anyways, but yeah, I've noticed that some of the groups around here, like you were saying, especially with some of the game stores, that the one that Bryce and I met at was very open. We had a lot of good different people come into the campaigns, a lot of different DMs playing different sessions. So there was a really wide mix. But near campus, you had your just diehard, this is all we play, this is how we play it. If you don't know the rules, get out. And that's kind of a negative attitude to come into. So yeah, it's but Marina is a part of that. She's our sixth companion who's not here right now because she's an essential worker. And so she actually started where you were talking about with tabletop RPGs or other games. When she was 13, I had taken her to the local gaming store where Bryce and I had met, and she's working on becoming a creative writing professor. So she, back at 13, wanted to get an idea of how to really spark her imagination. And I'm like, hey, role-playing is a good way to do that. So she got an idea with that. But we would also get these card games where, almost like tarot cards, you would pull out different images. And from that, you build a story. And you react to that story. She pulls a card, and it has a horse on it. So she could say she captured a horse, she's riding a horse, she ate a horse, whatever her mind came up with that. And then I would pull a card and I would say what the reaction was. Oh, look, here's a knight. You just ate the knight's horse. What happens? You know, things like that. So it kind of worked into that, and that really opened up that whole creativity. But I really like the idea of using other elements to get people into the game. One of the things that Bryce and I used to joke about was that 4th edition was a superhero or video game made into D&D. And so people were able to really just step in. They had never played a role-playing game before, but they understood how the basics of gaming worked from video games. And you had these superpowers, you had things you could do that other people in the game couldn't do, and it built off of that. So that really opened up a lot of doors. But in the same regard, it closed doors to people who believed in only one game system. So, no, I like that you could literally take anything and create it. We've hosted Clue mystery parties, how to host a murder party kind of thing. That works really good on the role-playing games, all the way up to the super complex Paranoia and all these other games where you literally have to have the books Call of Cthulhu, which has the madness system or the sanity system. So all of these different games really work well together. And the great thing is it's limited to your imagination. We've hosted different styles of gaming. We even talked about doing a Force game once, a Star Wars game. We kind of worked that into before the reintroduction of Eberron, having in the Spelljammer aspect to one of our gaming sessions and so forth. So it's up to you and your group. And like you said, you had a bad group, a bad DM that didn't want to really include you into the game. We've had people run in through the different times that really weren't super engaged in the game, or they had one way of thinking about it. They don't normally last too long with the different groups, but having that different way of thinking, that different aspect, hey, let's play this in a Renaissance period, or let's put it in modern times, or even Gamma world or a futuristic world. Those are all they're interesting ways that you can add into any game session. So sometimes it's to spice it up, sometimes it's just because that's the only way the person knows how to be introduced into the game. But a lot of different tabletop RPGs and non-RPGs that I've played that have built off of that, not to cut into your time, but yeah, there's pretty much anything out there that you want to play, as long as it requires some amount of imagination with it, and that's how you build it up. Jess was saying that she didn't feel she had a lot of imagination, but she does, and that's only because she wasn't allowed the opportunity to speak on that and to expound on it. And when you ask, you don't have to put them into a spot where they have to make a decision, but allow it to flow freely when they want to. And when she was given the opportunity with her dire squirrel and a gnome that was about the same size of her squirrel, I mean, they that alone brought antics into it. I believe your squirrel kept trying to steal something from a couple of the characters, or
oh yeah.
Yeah, kept trying to steal John's nuts.
Yes, that's right.
There were a couple wrestling sessions too. Oh. Yeah.
So, but to have that variety in there because of the creativity that's built in. I love the Jenga board idea. And Brandon, you've used tarot cards as a setting for D&D, and that's anything you're familiar with. Add it into the game. Figure it out. Go in with what you know.
I like that too, because if you bring people, especially who aren't super into D&D or know a lot about D&D, and you form a world or aspects of the world around something that they are into in culture, like Jenga or tarot cards, then it helps to draw them into living in the character that they are, and it just helps. But you touched on it. A lot of you touched on it, and it moves into our next topic, which are problem players at the D&D table, how to deal with them, and what would happen if your problem player is the DM. So
yeah, well, that makes all 6 of us problem players then.
But I think definitely on that one, the biggest single problem players I've seen are not actual problem players. They're just people that have a mindset that this is how I want to play, and they don't feel out the group that they're joining, or don't have a solid list of expectations for a group they're putting together. And I know a couple of us have run into it, that we've played with people that have had definitely far above and beyond. They wanted that absolute Critical Role experience. They wanted the voice acting, they wanted the perfect DM, they wanted everything. And
they didn't add any of it.
Yeah. And they thought they were doing their part, and they were mediocre at best. And I mean, we get that, but with the level of character building you want, you have to expect to be able to build your own character. But at the same time, I've run into, even in my own groups, I run into being the problem player sometimes because I'm used to playing a very much sword and board character. I'm used to running in, and I can beautifully illustrate any combat scene in the world. But when it comes down to it, I can't role play, or I can't descriptively role play a RPG scene, I guess. I can't role play bartering for an item. I can't role play life.
Just don't barter for hand crossbows. Bryce won't have it. But no, you see, that's an interesting thing, because just like Jess was saying, she doesn't see her imagination in it. Marina, who is missing, you two play very well off of each other, and Marina is very descriptive in her words. She once was talking about her character's background, which was an urchin, and she was literally in tears talking about how, as a child, she'd seen children being ripped apart by dogs in the street, and how dare you question the fairness of the world. And I mean, everybody's sitting in the game session looking at her like, Tim, do you need to take your daughter to an additional session of counseling? And the cool thing is, she was really into that, and you role played into that so wonderful, because she was saying she was a waif, and you turned around and became that big brother, that guardian figure. And you all feed off of each other, and you may not be the one to introduce the role play, but you react so well to the role play. And sometimes, like you said, you're a sword and board. My answer is violence, but there's a lot that comes to that as the gritty soldier who now is stuck with this waif. What do you do?
I still remember that session that you're talking about, that she was literally in tears RPGing this. And I mean, literally, that I know a lot of our listeners may not be familiar with the X card, but the X card is a role-playing mechanic that literally it's just a playing card with an X on it. And if someone's uncomfortable with the situation, they hold up the X card. I was literally, we were all playing this game in the same room. I'm looking at Brandon, I'm looking at Bryce, I'm looking at my wife, and I'm like, anybody? And I mean, Marina's playing this situation beautifully.
I almost hit the X card for her. I was like, "Oh, yeah, no, we need to like."
Yeah, we're all,
and the best part was
like, "Is this really how it's going to play out?" And we're like, "This feels like it's going too far." But
then she stopped and just looked around, like, "Oh, hey,
yeah,
is this too much?"
And she literally, after this scene, she stood up and took a bow to the room.
Well, she should have. It was a good scene.
I'll never forget that, because I was sitting in the corner of the room, and I literally just...
Well, you see, you're going to have role players, and the great thing is, how do you play off of that? Because if you're not comfortable role playing, and then somebody just does that, and you're like, oh, wow, I really am not made for this game. But that's not the whole game. Not the Critical Role where you have voice actors that can just, express things in such a vivid manner that everyone can tell exactly what that dungeon or ballroom looks like, or how that felt in a visceral way. You have your players that just say, well, I extinguished the torch. Nobody has dark vision. Suddenly, boom, that just changed the whole dynamics of the game. But that one little thing that didn't take a whole lot of role play just threw the whole episode into a completely different setting. So really discrediting yourself because you're not that person, everybody adds to the game.
And